Alright, so in this video, I want to show you something that's very important, or I should say equally important to what we've been doing so far, which are two keywords called final and constant. Now, the reason why this is important, let me write it here, probably at the bottom here. Say constant, const for constant, and final keywords. Now, the reason why this is important is because since Dart is a compiled language, there are some efficiency issues or efficiency gains that we may get from either using constant and finals or just a variable in general keyword. Okay, let's look at an example here real quick, because it's always a good idea to start with an example. That way we can internalize and understand what's going on. So let's say I say var, remember this, I say name, I'm going to say country, again, you've seen this. I'll just go ahead and set it to Jamaica. Okay, this is very nice. We know this print is going to say Jamaica. Now let's say we're building an application that has a certain value that never changes. Let's say the pi number. So what do we need to do? What we could do, we could say var, let's just call this pi, I think is equal to 3.14, okay? And then we can use pi to do all calculations and so forth, right? For instance, I can say pi times 300 or calculate the area of a certain of the circumference and all that stuff, that calculations. But what I'm trying to get at here is the fact that, well, if we have this as a var, that means this can actually be changed. We can say pi at some point and give it another value. And this is totally fine. But we don't want this to happen, right? Because if pi, since it's a constant number, it never changes, then if we just let our program let the variable or set it to where it can be changed at any time, that is not good for our program, right? Because as our programs grow, then somebody may accidentally or may end up changing it and changing the pi value, which will not be a good thing because the calculations are going to be off. So try to imagine you're working for NASA and you're building this application that will allow to calculate by how much the astronauts have to move their spacecraft, if we will, in order to re-enter the Earth. So you can see, if we go ahead and somehow change the pi number or a certain constant number, we're going to have our astronaut end up somewhere else than coming back to Earth. So it's a big deal. Okay, it's a little bit over dramatized the way I put it, but you get the idea here. So we now can use either constant or final keywords. Now, what is the difference between constant and final? Let me write here. So constant or const, we use it, this keyword, when we want the value or variable in this case to be a constant at compile time. So when this whole application, this whole bunch of code is being compiled, the value, if we have set a variable to constant, then it will still be a constant at compile time. And there are a lot of advantages to that. That's when we use constant. Now, we use final if we want the variable or value to always be constant, right? So it never changes, either at compile time or at any time at all. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do a little example here. So I'm going to get rid of all of this. I'm going to go ahead and say const. I'm going to say pi is equal to 3.14. That works. And down here, I'm going to say pi. I'm going to try to set it to something else, 34.56. And you notice we have a problem now. It's saying constant variables can't be assigned a value. Okay, what it's saying now is that, well, we already assigned that value, so we can't reassign it. That's exactly what's happening here. So this is a good thing, because if we set the pi to be a constant, this will not let us change it at any time, especially at compile time as well, which is very important. Because you could have certain code that was running by compile time, you want to change the pi, that is not going to work. That's not going to happen because you've just said that this at compile time even will still be constant. And this may not sound like groundbreaking at this point because we're just learning this programming language. Once we start building complex applications using Dart, or in this case using Flutter framework for Android and iOS apps, there will be times when we need to use constants and finals. You will see why. You will see as to why this actually makes sense and is important to consider. That is the difference there. Now, if I change this const to final, as the name implied, that we'll see that it has the same effect. But now, because we just learned, if you hover over, final value can only be set once. There we go. If we want to variable value to always, this should be, if we want a variable value to always be constant, never changes, then we use final. So if you hover over again, it reiterates what I just said. A final variable can only be set once. So the effect really is the same as we had before with a constant here. But the difference here is constant, we use this keyword when we want the value or variable to be a constant at compile time. Final, if we want a variable or value to always be constant, which means never changes. So there's a compile time and there's the final to have it so that it never changes. Okay, that's a very important distinction here, guys. Like I said, it's not a very groundbreaking news, if you will. It's like, okay, Paulo, sure, this is great. Thanks for teaching me this stuff, but when will I use? Why is this important? You will see at a later time, and as we evolve in our studies, in our Dart programming studies here, you will see the difference in when and when not to use these two. But for now, I just want you to know the distinction between these two. Okay? Perfect. And I'll see you next time.